time for us to move on to Asphalt 9. It's time. Okay, and yet another game, Paul, once again, that has shaken it up with our leaderboards, and you love to see it.
Oh my goodness, down to the wire. And I mean to the wire. Let's take a look at our leaderboards for iOS and Android. Oh my goodness. Like, this game is always close because we're dealing with tenths of seconds, hundreds of seconds. And this last week was no exception. Yogg-Saron, who's been up at the top of our iOS leaderboard for 2 weeks straight, was usurped. Was usurped, Glitter.
I can't. I mean, we saw Frog last week in Firum's package in his video, but Yogg-Saron felt unbeatable. He was just so confident and so strong in his tracks, and right now Frog said not today and leapfrogged above him.
Perfect. Yes, I mean, by like not a small margin either, by like a good chunk, which is crazy because small margins are kind of the name of the game for this game. As we take a look at Android as well and get to unveil a name up there at the top of the leaderboard. Our back-to-back champion of the ESL Mobile Open. It's Elite Joe, who is the only player to cross that 70-second threshold.
Which is insane to me. I mean, we saw all of the RPM crew up here last week. Elite Joe has now ousted them and then some here on this leaderboard. But that time is insane to me, especially when you look at it, because he was able to squeak under that 70-second mark with just 0.009 time-wise. I don't even know what that actually is. Like, that's nothing. How?
I don't think we can perceive that. That's faster than humans can actually perceive. It was so close indeed. And again, these players are advancing on trying to make it to our finals, our open finals for Asphalt. Once again, going to be on the 16th. So definitely mark that in your calendars. And this week was absolutely nuts. The nuance in these races, Glitter, was just crazy.
Yeah, suffice to say there was a lot of action that went on. So obviously we need to bring Firum in so he could break it all down for us and see exactly how that happened.
Thanks so much, Paul and Glitter. Well, we're now into our fourth and final week of the recaps for the Asphalt 9 ESL Mobile Open this season. And do we have some upsets to talk about today? My name is Firum, and I will be your co-host for the finals of Asphalt 9 for the North American Division on May 16th, so be sure to mark your calendars for that. Last week, we saw the closest battle yet, being only a tenth of a second apart, and we saw Yogg-Saron pull out his second first-place finish on iOS. But this week, the leaderboards have shifted quite a bit. We'll see some of the same faces from earlier in the season, but also some returning ones who you might recognize, as well as some new faces who we have not seen yet at all. But as always, before we check out the winning run on the final qualifiers for each platform, I'm going to break down the track for you. This week, we're on Nanjing Stroll, a variant of Shanghai. Now, this track is interesting as it's not terribly technical, it doesn't have a whole lot of jumps, but it does require a lot of precision in order to be fast on. You don't really have to think about momentum from jump to jump on this track, but it is important to try to get as many barrels as you can, for example, in certain places, so that you have enough nitro, so as to be able to have enough for the next turn, for example. But here at the beginning of the race, there is a trick you can do after the first barrel where you land on top of the median in the middle of the road, and this actually keeps some of your airspeed. Yes, this is an interesting feature in Asphalt 9, where if you land somewhere that is technically still in the track, but not really someplace that you're supposed to go, oftentimes the game will still think you're in the air since you're not on a road surface, and it will keep a lot of your airspeed, if not all of it, whenever you're riding on that. So this is one trick that players will use on many different tracks to get a better time. Now, around this turn, you don't have to, again, use perfect nitro, because the car's handling and nitro are good enough that it keeps its speed even without that. Now, you can use perfect nitro there, but you might not have as much nitro coming up to the next jump, so you'll have to do brake nitro a little bit more before you can shockwave over the river. And the reason why you can do this is because this car has a good enough nitro that it doesn't actually use up a whole lot of it, so when you land, you do have enough nitro to get to the next ramp without much of a problem, still having some so you can go up it without losing a lot of speed. Now again, at this turn, you don't need to do a perfect nitro either. Single nitro will get you around it without losing much speed, if any at all. Then you go up this jump here, hopefully getting 2 barrels, and then comes a part where this car's very good handling definitely comes into play. Between these two buildings, it's kind of like an S that you have to do, but if you get just the right racing line out of the barrel, you can pretty much go straight between them, getting very close to both walls but not touching them so you don't lose a lot of speed, and you don't have to drift and shockwave as you might have to in some other cars that can't handle as well. Then if you get a really sharp line, you can pick up the yellow nitro to the left, which means you don't have to do as much brake nitro, coming up to the next few turns where you take the yellow nitro ahead of time, and then perfect nitro around the first one here, and trying to near miss on the bus if you can. Pretty much anything you can do on this track to get more nitro is definitely good, since there aren't a lot of ramps for you to gain nitro that way. These turns are ones where it is beneficial to do a perfect nitro around because the car's handling is not good enough to keep the full speed if you just do single nitro, and again the car has a good enough efficiency so that you can get to the next ramp with still having some nitro to go up it without losing much speed. Then comes a split in the track, probably the biggest one, and here is where we see our racers go right, which is the faster route with cars that have better handling like this car does. You go to the left if you're in a very fast car that perhaps does not have as good of handling, but if you're able to get through the right route with just a perfect nitro and not having to drift anywhere in it except the very end, and if you can keep most of your speed through it like this car can, you're pretty much good to go that way. Then at the very end you do have to do a drift and then a shockwave out of the final turn around this route because it is too sharp to be able to get out of it, otherwise you would bump the wall if you just tried to do perfect nitro. And then all that's left is a couple of ramps and a final turn. On this first ramp it is best to do a 360 off of, because if you land just right, you'll be pointed pretty much straight toward the ramp that you need to go up next, which you can go up with shockwave or the double tap nitro if that's all that you have at the time. And at this point is just trying not to go super wide, and you fly pretty much straight into the finish line. And this concludes our track breakdown. So now let's check out the lap from the winner of the last qualifier on Android, none other than Elite Joe. He has been with us ever since Season 2, he's won 3 out of 6 seasons so far, and he is back taking the victory in the last qualifier for Android, so let's see how he managed to pull this off. So he does a shockwave straight off this ramp here so as not to lose speed with a 360, then does a perfect nitro around the corner to keep his speed, only gets one barrel but then does get a perfect run so that he has enough to perfect nitro around this corner very cleanly without hitting the sides at all. Coming up to 2 of the largest curves on the track, he decides to perfect nitro around the first one, gets a near miss on the bus to give him a bit more nitro, then perfect nitros again around the second one. Nanjing Stroll is in general a very perfect nitroable track, if that is even a word, because there are so many curves that are not so sharp that you have to shockwave around them, but sharp enough that you can't just use single nitro and still keep all your speed. He takes the faster right route there, then does drift around that turn and shockwave in order to reach his maximum speed before the final turn, does a 360 off this ramp to line up for the finish line, and comes in with a final time of 109.950. Now we're moving on to the winner on iOS for this week, Frog. He also does the same riding the median that Elite Joe did, and it gives him a good speed throughout there. Nanjing Stroll is a track where the biggest challenges are not the ramps and jumps, but rather how to keep your speed throughout the longer, straighter sections, and taking the turns with the best lines possible. Frog only uses single nitro around that turn, but does get 2 barrels, unlike Elite Joe, and then goes around this turn pretty much just as nicely, maybe going just slightly wider. He takes the yellow nitro bottle and perfect nitros around the first turn, doesn't actually get a near miss, and then again perfect nitros around the second turn as well, getting very close to the wall there. He gets a double barrel roll on this ramp, which gives him the maximum amount of nitro he can to come into one of the final sections of the track, where he again goes right, which is faster in this car, and the rest of his lap looks nearly identical to that of Elite Joe's. He gets the yellow nitro, drifts around this turn, then shockwaves out of it, but coming up this ramp he does have a bit more nitro, which allows him to 360 off of it and then shockwave into the finish line for a final time of 110.398. Almost half a second behind Elite Joe, so let's see how this came to fruition. On the very first ramp, Elite Joe gets 2 barrels versus Frog's 1, allowing him to gain a bit more nitro going off the median into the second barrel roll, but as they both get 2 barrels, which is enough to get you up to your maximum nitro bar, Frog is not really any behind after the jump. As they go around the next curve, Elite Joe uses perfect nitro, where Frog stays in single nitro, and Frog is actually frames ahead of Elite Joe at at this point in the race. He goes by the car to get his nitro bar up to full, and then they both shockwave straight off this ramp over the river. Then again, we see a little difference after they land as Elite Joe goes into perfect nitro around this turn and Frog stays in single. It seems to be working out for him pretty well so far, as he is just slightly ahead still at this point in the race. But here's where Elite Joe begins to make up for some of those lost frames from earlier. He takes a shorter racing line around these turns here, keeps slightly better speed through there, and is able to pick up the yellow nitro on the left side, giving him more nitro coming into this section. So they both pass that truck back there at around the same time. Frog gets a perfect run, bringing him back up to Elite Joe's nitro, but then Elite Joe gets a perfect run, giving him a little bit more nitro advantage throughout the next section. They both go around the next turn with perfect nitro, again basically neck and neck, and although Elite Joe does have more nitro coming into this jump, Frog manages to keep pretty much just as much speed, with both of them getting 2 barrels, and so they both land with relatively similar nitro. Since Elite Joe's and Frog's runs are now pretty much identical down to the frame at this point in the race, we know that something must have happened differently to them in the last quarter of the race. Here we can see Elite Joe beginning to get a little bit of a lead over Frog as he takes a shorter racing line around this curve, reaching the yellow nitro bottle first, and mainly these tighter curves are what allow him to pull ahead toward the end of the race because they both do the same sort of shockwave. Even though Frog has a bit more nitro coming into the end, Elite Joe has a nearly perfect landing after this jump, allowing him to get a very tight turn. He goes off the ramp, does go a bit over to the left, hitting the side, but this doesn't really slow him down much, and he's able to come into the finish line just ahead of Frog. And so we have the standings for the final week of qualifiers for this season in Asphalt 9. On the Android side, in first place is Elite Joe, then Elite Huracan in second, and TGL in third. On the iOS side, we have Frog coming in first, Yogg Saran coming in second, and Quiet Riot 92 coming in third. Congratulations to everyone who made it this far in the qualifiers, and I can't wait to see and cast your runs for the final rounds. Again, these will be held on May 16th. I will be co-hosting them along with Inver, and it's going to be a lot of fun, just like the series was to make, so I hope to see all of you there. My name is Furum, this has been your 4th and final week of Asphalt 9 recaps, and now back to Paul and Glitter.
I have to say, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be sad for some of our future episodes not having the joyous experience that is Asphalt 9 as our ladder's coming to a close, but huge shout-outs to Ferrum for the amazing recaps week over week, and like you said, 16th, mark your calendars, going to be here for the plans. Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning into our mobile open recap again this week. Your support means a lot to us, and it would mean even more if you could hit that like and subscribe button down below the video. Make sure you stay up to date with all the content that we're releasing here on the channel. All the best mobile esports action, and you don't want to miss it.